Good morning, everyone. My name is Florencia Paz. I am a research analyst with the International Food Policy Research Institute, and I am part of the work group, the gender team that does work on the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. We're going to be presenting today two indicators that had been developed using the project level Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index for Markets Inclusion. In a project, we're going to be talking about two specific indicators. This is our extended team. You're going to hear from some of us today, but we're also going to all be hands on deck for the breakout sessions and listening through it. I'm not going to say it's a lot of us. It's a lot of us. A little bit more about the agenda. Today, we're going to have the overview about the pro-WEAI and the updates that we have done with the pro-WEAI plus markets inclusion modules. We are then going to talk about the quantitative data collection, specifically for the two indicators we're going to discuss. Then we're going to discuss how we use the qualitative data and how we combine the qualitative data with the quantitative data. And finally, we are going to have reflections and closing. There will be work groups, so we expect this to be dynamic. Please use the chat box for any questions you have. We are going to address them through the chat or during talking, but we will address any of your concerns, comments, suggestions, any opinions you have. I will pass then. Oh, you can also to understand better what we're going to be discussing. It will be very handy if you have taken the pro-WEAI Foundations module that you can find at the Food Security Portal, which is the address. We're going to be sharing the slides anyways afterwards, but you can find it at the link attached. This is suggested prep work to understand a little bit better where we're coming from, how these indicators are developed, how do they get combined. Is a free self-paced course, is available in different languages. And if you have not completed, you might want to do it, and then it will help understand better what we're discussing here. With said that, I'm passing the torch to our co-workers, Jessica Heckert and Kalyani Braga. Sorry, and Kalyani. I'm not gonna butcher your last name, Kalyani. Sorry, for them to follow up with how the pro-WEAI module came up to be. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Heckert. I'm going to be presenting on an overview of pro-WEAI as well as updates related to the market inclusion module jointly with Kalyani Raghunathan, who we will get for the second half of this presentation. So as Flor mentioned, you guys can go to the next slide. As Flor mentioned, you all had the opportunity to complete an online learning course specifically focused on pro-WEAI prior to the start of this, prior to this specific learning lab. You can still go back in and complete that after the course if you think that will be helpful and you haven't completed it yet. However, we'll just grab a few highlights from that foundations module, and so that we can more or less be on the same page here. But in general, in this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the market inclusion module. So why do we focus on what is empowerment specifically? So we go back to sort of the theoretical roots of empowerment, and we're thinking about Naila Kabir's elements of empowerment, which include resources, agency, and achievements. And we think of this as a cyclical process, but resources are the various materials that are human, social, whatever they might be, that serve to enhance one's ability to exercise choice. Agency is the capacity to define one's own goals and make strategic choices in pursuit of those goals, particularly in a context where the ability to make these decisions was previously denied. Those of you who have worked on women's empowerment in any capacity are probably familiar with that phrasing, because much of our work on women's empowerment is framed around that idea of making strategic choices. Additionally, the third component of Kabir's work is achievement, and those can be the achievement of one's own goals, whether they're self-defined or group defined. But within this framework, there are a lot of existing measures for achievements and resources. We know how to, think about nutritional outcomes or to measure, women's assets. But there's been less work on developing how we measure agency. So that's sort of the focus with our work on WEAI overall. I just want to dive in a bit more on this idea of what is empowerment. When we think of gender sensitive or gender responsive development programs, we see a range of programs that might be classified as either things that reach women, benefit women, empower women, or transform the gender dynamics in the context where the work is occurring. So reaching women, we think of that as including women in program activities. That might be, scheduling a program at a time when women are more available, or ensuring that she has safe transportation to an activity. A project that benefits women might focus on ways of improving her well-being, such as food security, our income, or health status in some way. And these are all great things to achieve within a program, but neither reach nor benefit really are part of this idea of empowerment. So empowerment, we want to think specifically about strengthening women's abilities to make, or helping women strengthen their own abilities to make strategic choices and put those choices into action. And then, further thinking about these in terms of transform, what is sort of the gender dynamics around where a project is taking place. And these might be, changing gender norms and attitudes of the community at large, making safer spaces for women, involving men in ways that help them understand how projects impact women specifically, etc. Just want to highlight pro-WEAI specifically. So pro-WEAI, the project level is pro, and WEAI is Women's Empowerment and Agricultural Index. Women's Empowerment and Agriculture Index. WEAI was developed in 2012, and since then we have continued to further develop it. And the pro-WEAI is one specific example of this. Pro-WEAI was developed in collaboration with 13 agricultural development projects under the Gender Assets and Agricultural Project Phase 2. In doing so, we highlighted specific aspects of empowerment that projects thought were important, enabled and worked with projects to enable the assessments of empowerment impacts on agricultural development projects. The pro-WEAI has 10 indicators. You'll see a wheel of these indicators in our following slides, and we focus on 3 different types of agency: intrinsic agency, instrumental agency, and collective agency. Intrinsic agency is this idea of power within. So this could be self-efficacy. Instrumental is power too. So decisions about how you use your income, and etc. And then collective agency is power with. So sort of that additional power that comes from coming together as a group in order to achieve more. So as we worked on pro-WEAI, we identified that some specific types of projects may require additional indicators in order to capture all the aspects of women's agency that are relevant to what they're trying to change. And 2 specific examples of those are our nutrition sensitive agriculture projects, as well as our market inclusion projects. So in previous iterations or in previous learning labs at ANH, we have presented in depth on the nutrition sensitive agriculture, or a specific add-on that's called the pro-WEAI Health and Nutrition module that's geared towards nutrition sensitive agriculture projects. There are a number of publications out with those that you can find. And then today we're focusing specifically on market inclusion projects. So these are the types of projects that really focus heavily on ensuring that the products that are being produced, the agricultural products that are being produced, are sort of may undergo some form of transformation or processing, as well as are often sold at markets, often larger markets. And so in this case, women sort of, are often involved in the home processing activities, or even processing at a larger scale, and are also involved in marketing activities. In many cases, the project aims to enhance those aspects. And so we're aiming to measure elements of women's empowerment that are specifically focused on market inclusion. This is just a quick summary of what pro-WEAI is, and then our additional indicators. So our green shaded indicators are the intrinsic agency indicators in pro-WEAI: autonomy and income, self-efficacy, and attitudes related to intimate partner violence against women. Our instrumental agency items are those in the red, orange, and yellow color scheme: visiting important locations, work balance, access to and decisions on financial services, control over use of income, ownership of land and other assets, and input into productive decisions. And then the purple, we have collective agency, and pro-WEAI has one indicator of collective agency, and that is group membership. Our add-ons related to the health and nutrition module, I'm not going to focus on these in depth, but those all address different forms of instrumental agency. And then for our market inclusion add-on, we focus on other intrinsic agency indicators in the green here. So entrepreneurial mindset and autonomy and working conditions. Other intrinsic agency indicators. Other instrumental agency indicators we've developed include control over use of income and outputs from the main value chain, and input and decisions about the main value chain. And then finally, we have these. You notice they don't have a color, but we frame these as the empowerment environment. So here we have access to reliable sanitation while working, as well as feeling safe from sexual harassment while working. And though these aren't within an individual woman's purview of something she can necessarily change, it's really important to understand these ideas in the context of a project, because they may be the barriers that are sort of preventing the project from achieving its goals. So and my colleagues are going to go into much more detail on all of these, but I just want to highlight that in both of these cases, the plus sign is an indicator that we start with pro-WEAI as the core and as the foundation. And then these are additional indicators that we add on in addition to pro-WEAI, core pro-WEAI, to have a better understanding of the aspects related to market inclusion. So I believe we're going to the next slide now and handing things over to Kalyani.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So following on Jessica's overview of the evolution of the pro-WEAI+MI, I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what the existing indicators look like, and then what is the additional work that we've been doing. And so the main question behind the pro-WEAI+MI is the question of whether market inclusion is actually conducive to women's empowerment or not. And the underlying sort of motivation for developing these indicators is that we won't know the answer to this question unless we actually take the opportunity to measure them. And so the work to adapt the pro-WEAI to include indicators around market inclusion has been an iterative process using mixed methods, both qualitative and quantitative data. And the initial round of indicators is based on work that was done in 4 countries: Philippines, Bangladesh, Benin, and Malawi. And at the bottom, we see several aspects of market inclusion that we might be concerned with. So there's increased market orientation within the context of agricultural production, but there's also an expansion of work into rural non-farm enterprises, into wage employment that's outside the sphere of agriculture or on-farm employment, and then also increasing concerns of migration and urbanization. And so we're able to capture some of these in the pro-WEAI+MI. So I won't go into detail on this because Jessica just walked us through, but just to remind you that the market inclusion indicators include measures that touch upon intrinsic agency, instrumental agency, and then this empowerment environment indicators as well. So details on the indicators that we developed, the process of how those were developed, the kind of iterative mixed methods process that we followed, but also recommendations for how these can be used in value chain projects are all published in a recent discussion paper. And like I said, this is based on the work in Bangladesh, Philippines, Benin, and Malawi. We will make these slides available after the end of this presentation. So we encourage all of you who are interested in both the process of the development of these indicators as well as the indicators themselves to please access that discussion paper and of course reach out to us if you have further questions. So that brings me on the next slide into our recommendations for actually using the pro-WEAI+MI. And these are fourfold, some of which Jessica has already touched on in her presentation. So the first aspect of those is settling on an appropriate sampling strategy. So depending on the value chain intervention or project that's in question, we want to be able to make sure that we design our samples so that we're capturing key actors along the value chain. So this is an expansion beyond just the act of production into post-processing, post-harvest processing, but also other activities that are of relevance. The second thing that Jessica touched on is that all of these use the core pro-WEAI as the base and are intended to be interpreted alongside that core pro-WEAI. So we're not advocating that these be used as a standalone indicator, but that these be used sort of in addition to the core pro-WEAI indicators that Jessica touched upon. The third aspect is that qualitative data collection is essential, both to triangulate findings and fill in missing gaps, but also to provide very useful and essential context to the quantitative findings and numbers. And so we really advocate for projects to use a similar mixed methods approach as has been used in the development of these indicators to kind of collect both the quantitative and the qualitative data at the same time. And we do have protocols also for the qualitative data collection. And then lastly, we intend for these to be user-defined. So not all of the market inclusion indicators that we propose will be relevant for all value chains or for all interventions. And so we intend for these to be to act as a dashboard where people can kind of pick and choose indicators from these additional pro-WEAI+MI indicators that they want to prioritize or that are relevant within the context of their project. So this brings us to our work on the new market inclusion indicators that are serving specific purposes. And these are under the project that some of you might be aware of, which is called Applying New Evidence for Women's Empowerment. This is a 4-project portfolio of market inclusion, value chain, market-oriented projects in both India and Mesoamerica. And the focus here is slightly different from projects that we've worked with in the past. There's a focus on high-value commodities. In some cases, these are export-oriented, for example, coffee in Mexico. There's also a strong focus on collectives. So we have these farmer-producer organizations in the context of India, cooperatives, they're known by producer organizations or other names in other countries. And so ANU had this twofold additional focus on the collective and on the high-value commodities. And I saw a question in the chat that popped up around a greater focus on collective agency. And so the ANU portfolio is actually, because of its focus on these farmer collectives, is actually going down that route. And so under the ANU portfolio, we're using these 4 projects to kind of develop, test, and validate additional market inclusion indicators that might be relevant to different types of market inclusion projects. And the whole presentation today will kind of go into more detail on these indicators, but some of these include, for example, sales and negotiation, additional financial indicators, including digital finance, use and access of that, and also more indicators around this empowerment environment that Jessica talked about. And so all of this work is under construction. The new indicators should be available at the end of 2023. And we'll be happy to share more details on preliminary work in case any projects are interested in kind of piloting these and improving the development. So we'll turn now to what's being included in the new indicators that we're developing under ANU. So I'll just walk through these fairly quickly because you can see there's quite a lot of information on the slide. So the new indicators under ANU come from the same three forms of agency, instrumental, intrinsic, and collective, and then also those environmental indicators. So the largest number of indicators come under the instrumental category. A lot of these relate to the main value chain, and that will be dependent on what the project is focusing on. So for example, I gave the example of the coffee value chain in Mexico. So in that case, we might be concerned about control over use of income or input into decisions around that coffee value chain. And so these are obviously defined by the structure of the project under consideration. And in addition to these main value chain indicators, we also have information, access to information, access to weather related indicators and advisories, participation in negotiations of sales, freedom of movement, and access to digital financial services. So all of these come under the instrumental agency indicators. Intrinsic, we have two indicators that we're considering for inclusion. One is attitudes about gender-based violence against women, and one is an entrepreneurial mindset. Under the collective agency, like I said, we're expanding the definition of these. So we're looking at indicators related to membership in those farmer producer organizations or farmer producer collectives, as well as the group collective agency measures. And then lastly, on environment, we have a set of indicators that relate to aspects of the empowerment environment that we think are important for these high value market oriented value chain projects. So these include access to reliable sanitation, to menstrual hygiene management, critical consciousness about safe and healthy work environment, and whether they actually have access to that, and then whether or not they feel safe from sexual harassment. And some of these will come up for deeper discussion later in the presentation. And so that's kind of the overview of the indicators that we're considering under the pro-WEAI. And with that, I believe I hand back to Flor.
Hi, thank you so much, Kalyani and Jessica. I hope you found the introduction and the explanation of what the pro-WEAI is and where we're coming from, clarifying for where we're going through. Now we're going to present a set of items under quantitative data collection. We're basically going to focus on best practices for the survey overall, but also with specific care for the modules that we are working with. And then we are going to present the modules, a video demo for the modules that we're using to construct these two indicators, the module G2, which is I'm sorry, I'm having a problem here. Role in the household decision making around livelihood activities, which is the same module that we use to construct the overall indicator of control over use of income in pro-WEAI, but we're going to focus on control over use of income for the main value chain. Then we're going to work on how we construct the indicator in itself at an individual level. So how we define if a person is adequate or not in such indicator. And then we're going to move on into the feel safe from sexual harassment indicator, which is one of these environmental empowering environments, if you want, indicators that we have developed under pro-WEAI+MI. We are going to have another video. We're going to watch another video for module G14, which is the one where we discuss that help us gather the information that we need to construct the indicator. And we are going to then explain how we construct the indicator at an individual level. You are going to see me on the videos with my coworker, Simone Fass, and then the indicator construction is going to be discussed by our coworker, Sumajit Rai, who works from the Delhi office. One thing that I didn't say, the team that you saw, those almost 15 people who work on the pro-WEAI and the gender team, are teams that are based in Delhi, in Dakar, and in DC. So we are, besides being very multi backgrounds and multinationals, we are also like based in different countries. So that makes us, and we have a lot of like different backgrounds, right? We have economists, we have demographers, so that makes our conversations pretty fruitful and enriching. Next slide, please. Best practices. We have some very important best practices to take into account overall for the survey. The first one is community uptake. Like, it's really good to get buy-in from community leaders before we go. We have found that it's really good and useful to have buy-in from community leaders before we go into the field, that help us be more welcome into the houses of the respondents. We do that by usually introducing ourselves to the communities. Another point is consent. Our consent, we do state a consent form at the beginning of the survey, but the consent is ongoing through the whole survey. We make sure that the enumerators and the respondents know at every step of the question, if the respondents are not comfortable, they can either suspend the survey or they can skip questions. It's very important also for us to have a common understanding of the household definition, the universal codes, and use of the training manual. In the training module that is provided at the website, you can see how each of the questions should be asked and how each of the questions should be coded. This help us standardize analysis through different studies. The household definitions help us identify, make sure that we're always identifying the same household, and we're also identifying the same type of respondent. Going back to the idea of consent, it's important. There's a couple of issues that make us, that foster a good environment for the survey. One is consent, privacy, having gender correspondence between the numerator and the respondent, and having a respectful environment. What do I mean with this? Privacy, we need to make sure that the individual can respond to can answer the questions in an environment that is safe, that is private, that we don't have other people around, that they can respond freely with their opinions without having fear of someone else overhearing them. Because we're trying to foster a good environment for our surveys, we also make sure that there's gender correspondence between the enumerator and respondent, mostly for women. So women should always be interviewed by women, but if we can, also for men, as in men should be interviewed by men. This is important where we're talking, you're gonna see, like, we have in pro-WEAI+, very sensitive modules that you want people to feel safe and be able to give their opinions freely. And following on that is very important to foster respectful environment. This is that the enumerators have to be sensitized over the content of the survey, and they also have to be able to not show their judgment or their personal opinions regarding the respondents' answers, either by word or body language during the interview. Okay, we're gonna show now a video, and some questions that we wanna know is, you have just heard, I just explained some of the best practices. I'm gonna show videos that are not perfect. We recorded them, taking that into account. I want you to be able to notice what good practices we did, what can we have done better. If you have any questions and observations, please use your chat window to share them, and we will acknowledgement and discuss after the video.
Research analyst at the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington, D.C.
Hello, my name is Florencia Paz, and I am a research analyst at the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington, D.C.
Today, we will be demonstrating in this video how to administer the pro-WEAI for market inclusion modules that are necessary for calculating the indicators control over use of income from the main value chain and gender-based hostility in the workplace. In this demonstration, I will be playing the role of the enumerator, and Flor will be playing the role of the respondent, Maria. Maria is a 37-year-old mother in rural Guatemala, and Maria's family produces green beans for exportation. Okay, so let's dive in. All right, Great. So Maria, thank you again. You've already responded to questions about your household. And also, I've just asked you about the
I am sorry, Elena, this is the wrong
family
video.
does. Now I'd like to ask you questions about the main commodity that your family produces. So your family produces green beans for exportation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And in the last 12 months, have you or anyone else in your household participated in green bean production?
Yes, we've already done 3 harvests.
Okay, wow, great. All right. And did you yourself participate in the producing these green beans?
Yeah, I help my husband sometimes.
Okay, great. When decisions are made regarding the green bean production, who is it that normally makes these decisions?
Usually it's my husband and his brother, my brother-in-law. But sometimes I help with some of the decisions.
Okay. And how much input do you have in making decisions about the green beans? Do you feel like you have little to no input in the decisions, input into some decisions, input into most or all the decisions about the green beans?
Oh, overall, I think I have input into some of them. Usually, I'm not usually involved, but sometimes when they're having a discussion, I can come and join and they can talk about things and take into account my opinions. So I will say some of the decisions.
Okay, great. Thank you. And to what extent do you feel you can participate in the decisions regarding the green beans if you wanted to? To like not at all? Do you feel like you can participate to a small extent, medium extent, or a high extent?
I think I can participate if I wanted in some of them, because it's not like they invite me always to all of the decisions. It's more like if I catch them, talking about things and I don't have anything else to do, I can join them.
Okay, so maybe to a small extent then.
Yeah.
Okay. And how much input did you have in decisions about how much of the outputs of the green bean production to keep for consumption at home rather than selling? Do you feel like you have little to no input in these decisions, input into some decisions, input into most or all decisions? What do you feel about that?
Well, in that case, because I am the one who is in charge of the cooking and preparing the meals for the household, I think I have input in everything that I want to keep. Like I get to decide how much we keep of the production.
Okay, great. So most are all decisions about the outputs of the green bean production. Great, thank you. And how much input did you have in decisions about how to use the income generated from the green bean production and exportation?
Well, that is not my job. That's the money. My husband is in charge of the money, so that is not my job. I don't participate in that.
Okay, so you feel like you don't really have any input at all into the decisions about the income generated? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. All right, and now we'll move on to the next activity.
Everyone has, I see some good opinions on why isn't she involved in the decision? Is it cultural power play? Well, this is definitely something that is being acknowledged for during the qualitative interviews, and Emily can explain better if she wants to. We do discuss this type of things of like what are things that are underneath the participation or not participating of the in the decision making, right? Like right now the probing is up to the level of deciding if they participate or not. Any other comments we have?
Just to kind of follow up, one of the things we find in the qualitative work is we're able to go a lot more in depth into understanding like the why. So, we'll ask questions more like, how does your family make decisions? Where are you able, like in what topic areas are you able to take more decision making? Do you want to participate more in decisions and whatnot? So I'm just kind of sharing these examples to say there's a lot of reasons a woman or a man might not participate in a particular decision or type of decision. But that's really where the qualitative work comes in handy, is to understand, okay, is it a cultural power play? But why is that the power play? And is that unique to this context? Is the potential intervention that we might be doing an impact evaluation on, like changing the dynamics around decision making? So really more about like drawing up the story of why. But anyway, thanks, Flora.
I just want to note, Flora, that at some point in the interview, the interviewer responded to something Maria said by being like, wow, okay, great. And so that was one of the examples that you were giving about not expressing judgment. And I think we struggle with that in the context of India as well, that often you'll get responses, particularly around, say, freedom of mobility or other aspects, attitudes towards gender-based violence that are surprising to the enumerator, but that they have to be very careful not to express surprise or judgment or confusion around those. So that was something that struck me as well.
Yeah, I thank you so much, Kalyani. That is indeed very important, and we do struggle with that because you try to be encouraging with the respondent, but also at one point you need to just back off and let them let them talk without in a neutral background if we want to. Continuation. So we have you have seen Simone doing this interview to Maria, and she has followed the questionnaire that we see on hand. Now, Sumajit is going to take that information that he got from a different questionnaire and show us how would you construct the indicator at an individual level for an enumerator, for, I'm sorry, a respondent. Sumajit, go ahead.
Thanks, Flora. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. So what you see here is a module called Role in Household Decision Making around livelihood activities. The module, as is similar to the video, begins by asking about the crop that is being implemented by the project, right? In the case of treatment, this could be the main value chain crop. And in the case of control, this could be either a main value chain crop or any other crop that fetches them the most income, right? Projects can design the two questions that I mentioned based on their study design. We haven't shown it here, but then these are the two questions that you should ask at the very onset of this module, right? So once you got your main value chain commodities, green beans, coffee, watermelon, tomatoes, or whatever it is that is being implemented by the project, we ask so then we ask here what all activities were being undertaken in this main value chain. As you can see, for a main value chain, you can be doing farming, processing, trading, or marketing, right? A family or the individual could be doing one or all or some of these activities. So the first question that we ask that you see on your screen is G203, which asks, does the household in the last 12 months undertaken the main value chain activity, right? It's a simple yes or no binary question. When somebody says no, then we move to the next line item, which is the main value chain 2, right? However, if somebody says yes, somebody in my household, the respondent says that somebody in my household has undertaken among the four any one or more of the activities for main value chain, then we ask them the next question: did they, as in the respondent, participated in the listed 4 items, that is farming, processing, or trading of the main value chain in the last 12 months? Again, here as well, if the respondent says that yes, my family participated, but I never did it, we move to the next item, that is main value chain 2. However, if here also the respondent confirms that the family and the respondent both participate in the farming, processing, or trading of the main value chain, then we ask them the question that we just saw in our video, right? When decisions are taken regarding the activity, who normally takes this decision? So as you can see, the instruction written there, we ask them, they can include up to 3 people of 18 years or above, and if they haven't done any, if they have not taken any decision, again we move to the next value chain, right? However, if they have done the training, if they have taken the decision making on their own, then we skip G206 and G207 and move to G208. That is, we skip the next two questions, right? And if the decision was taken jointly, that is in case of the respondent as well as the other family members, we ask the next subsequent questions, right? So in the next question, that is G206, is around if how much input did they have in the decision making. As you can see, it's a scale wherein we ask them where they can respond, that is, they have made very little or some inputs or no input at all, right? Or it could very well happen that they didn't make any decisions at all. That is G206. In G207, we ask them, as we saw in the video, to what extent, if they feel, can they make any inputs in the decision making. It's the perception question where we are asking to the extent which they feel they can make the decision, provide input in the decision. Again, this is a scale wherein we have not at all, to a small extent, to a medium extent, to a higher extent, right? The last two questions, that is 08 and 09, which we also saw in our video, is around how much commodity or the output that is supposed to be kept at home and how much to be sold. This again is similar to what we saw in G206, which is around inputs in decision making. This is again a similar scale wherein we are asking the amount of input that they made during the amount of crops that needs to be kept at home and that needs to be sold. The last question for this main value chain 1 is the income that was generated from the sale of the outputs, how to use it, the inputs and the decisions around how to use it, how much input did the respondent have. This again is similar to the previous, the responses are, the scale is similar to the previous question. Just a note here, we asked about a single value chain across all the questions, and then we move to the next value chain. If there are some skips, if that gets triggered, then automatically we move to the next value chain. So this is how the questionnaire is laid out for value chain 1 and value chain 2. Next slide, please. Right. Yes. So what we just saw, during our video and the questionnaire. So this is how the raw data looks. So once you have conducted a survey from the database, the topmost panel looks exactly like this. For the visual perspective, what we have done is we have kept a unique ID, that is the household ID. For a single household, we have made 2 rows. But in the actual data set, when you download the data set or when you access your database, it will just be a single row wherein there will be a household ID, the gender, and the main value chain, right? Main value chain 1 and main value chain 2. For visual point of view, we have kept 2 rows, and here we have 2 households. As you can see, the household 10116, the first household grew sweet peas and peas, right? This is an example from our Guatemala project wherein G203 and G204, which corresponds to whether the household participated in the main value chain and whether the individual who's responding the questionnaire participated in the main value chain. In both of these conditionality, they said yes. Then when we asked them, in the case of sweet peas, who takes most of the decision, the respondent said that they themselves take most of the decision. However, in the case of peas, it's a collective joint decision involving few of the other members of the household, right? And then we asked about question G206, to what extent do they feel they have provided the input when the discussions or the decisions were being made. In case of sweet peas, the respondent said that they felt they had inputs in some of the decisions, while in the case of peas, the second commodity, the respondent felt that they had little to no input in any of the decisions, right? G207 asked about if they wanted, to what extent could they have done or provided inputs. In the case of peas, we see that even if the respondent wanted, she felt that she couldn't have provided any input, while in the case of sweet peas, the respondent felt that to some extent she could have provided some inputs. The last two questions, G208 and 09, what we do here is we ask them the same questions around the question that we just mentioned previously, right? To what extent do they provide input and decision around how much output to keep and how much output to sell? So here the respondent felt that they provided little to no input in decision making. And the same goes for income, where they felt that they provided little to no income in decision making. So what we do, so this is how the raw data looks like. Once we take this raw data, then we do the first round of processing. What you can see in the next table below, we have a truncated set of variables wherein we say that, okay, whether in the case of sweet peas, whether they participated in the activity or not. So the participation, this variable gets generated based on G204, whether they themselves did participate or not. And then the next question is some input output. It's a shorthand, but what essentially it means is that how much did they have some input in making decisions around how much output to keep and how much output to sell, right? As you can see, what we do is little to what we consider adequate is anything. If they say that little to no input is there, then we say that they have little to no input is considered as no input. However, if they would have made some input or most of the inputs, then we would have considered it adequate, right? So again, because they had little to no input and they provided no input, we score them 0 in the case of how much output to keep and how much output to sell. Similarly, in the case of what to do with the income, the decisions around what to do with the income, again, because they had little to no input, we score them 0, right? The last variable that you see is some input both. What essentially it's a shorthand, but essentially it means that they had input in both. They had input in decision making around both how much output to keep and sell, as well as how to use the income. If they have inputs in both of these, then we assign a value 1 or a 0 otherwise. So this is how the processing of the level 1 processing of the data looks like. Can you click on the? Yes, right. Now what we do is, as I told you earlier, right? In our database, we'll have a single row comprising of all the household detail, which we ends up showing you here in the last table, wherein the value chain here are sweet peas or peas. The candidate, the respondent participated in both the activities. However, the continuous variable is nothing but a summative score of some input both. Because they didn't meet the adequacy threshold, the continuous variable in both the cases is 0. So is the binary. Binary here is again the indicator that we are trying to construct whether the respondent had input control over use of income in value chain. So the broad adequacy threshold here is participation in or has input in decisions related to both. So that's what I earlier mentioned, that they have to have both decision-making ability in income and output for main value chain activity that he or she is participating.
Okay, now we're gonna go towards the second indicator that we're discussing in this presentation. The indicator is feel safe from sexual harassment, and we are gonna use information based on the module G14, perceptions of sexual harassment. As you watch the video again, take notes, tell us what stood up, what good practices did you notice, what should have been done better, any questions, observations, and use the chat. As you see, our coworkers are being very steady at answering all the questions that are coming up.
We're on the last module now, just a few more questions. So next, I will ask you some questions about experiences that others of your same gender and age may experience while trying to earn a livelihood. And before I ask you these questions, I just want to remind you that you always have the right to refuse to answer any of the questions if any of them make you uncomfortable or for any reason at all, and you don't need to tell me why. So earlier, you said that you spend most of your working time in your family's agricultural fields. Is that correct?
Yes, I help my husband in his field.
Okay, great. So in general, for women of your age who live in your community, when they're at their place of work, how often do you think that they have experiences where others make remarks that people of your sex, women, are not suited for the kind of work that they do? Do you think that people make these remarks always, often, sometimes, never?
Well, it's not our place, like the woman's place of work is not the field, it's the house. So I feel like we are constantly reminded that we shouldn't be there.
So you think this happens often
Always.
or always? Always. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. And how often do you think that other women like yourself have experiences when other people make unwanted attempts to establish a romantic or sexual relationship with them despite their efforts to discourage it? Do you think that these sort of unwanted attempts happen always, often, sometimes, never?
But people, once you're married, they don't do it, because our community is very small. So they don't do it once you're married. So I will say sometimes if you're single, it happens. But yeah.
So, okay, sometimes. Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for clarifying that. And how often do you think that other women like yourself, have experiences where others make them feel like they're being bribed to engage in sexual behavior? Always, often, sometimes, never?
Oh, never. That never happens. No.
Okay.
Never.
Okay,
The community is very small. They will find out if someone does something wrong.
Okay. Okay. And how often do you think that other women like yourself have experiences where other people sexually proposition them? For example, they were invited to engage in sexual intercourse.
Well, if you're single, that happens more often, but if you're married, it never happens. So I will say sometimes it happens.
So, and for women like yourself who are, about of your age, maybe, are they typically married?
Yeah. Typically, women my age are married.
So would you think for them, how often would they be sexually propositioned by others? Always, often, sometimes, never?
People like me that are married, that wouldn't happen because they know you're married in our community. But if you're single, it doesn't matter pretty much what age, people just, they wouldn't see a problem with that.
So maybe sometimes then?
Yes, I will say sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, sometimes. Okay, great. And then thank you for clarifying that. And then again, for the last question, how often do you think that other women have experiences where people make them afraid that they will be treated poorly, for example, threatening them, or that they might not be given work, or they'll be ignored if the women didn't cooperate sexually? How often do you think that might happen for other women like yourself?
So I work with my husband on his field, and I guess if I don't do what he needs, then he will be mad, and probably he will not be happy with me. So I need to do what he needs me to do.
Do you think that happens always or often?
Yes,
sometimes?
always, because
always.
He's the man. He's the man of the relationship. We should, yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Well, those are all of my questions. That's the end of the survey today, and I really appreciate you speaking with me today and taking this time and just to be open and providing all this information. We really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any comments that we're having? I see other way around. Transactional sex to favors benefits offered to the female gender. We have asked this questionnaire with the other way, and we didn't get really good responses. Like, it wasn't super useful. So in terms of building up an indicator and making sense of it. So it stays with the women, and that's where we're focusing right now. The pro-WEAI+, how long does it take? I think at this point we can say it's around 45 minutes. As you can see, people tend not to want to talk directly about certain issues, so you have to probe. But that's how it has been our experience. Sumachi, do you want to take over?
Sure. Thanks, Fleur. Right. So as part of the next set of slides, I'll be walking you through the questionnaire of the perception of sexual harassment module. In our questionnaire, it's module G14. What we have is 5 scenarios being listed out, and the question is around is being asked to a respondent in a indirect manner. If you see the questionnaire, we ask them for a woman. So it's about the community and the woman who lives in their community of similar age group, and when they are at work, place of work, how often do they have they have experienced any of these scenarios. So it's to break it down for you. Essentially, we are asking the respondents to imagine women of similar age in their communities and at the place of work, and how often do any of these scenarios occur in their place of work, right? So let me walk you through the scenarios for you. The first one that we are looking here is its words as make remarks that people of their sex are not suitable for the kind of work that they do. So it's about the women in the community, similar age group. Have they experienced that that they are being told that they are not adequate for this kind of work? Another scenario that we have here is whether women in their work of the similar age and in the community at the place of work have felt unwarranted establishment of romantic or sexual relationship, even if they discourage such attempts. Right? That's scenario number B. In scenario number C, what we look at is whether women of the age group and in the community and at the place of work have they felt that they are being bribed to engage in sexual behavior, right? The last one is the sexual proposition for them. For example, so we have used an example here, inviting them to engage in sexual intercourse with them, and option E is make them afraid or make them feel targeted, and then even threaten them that they will not get work or they will get ignored in the place of work if they don't cooperate sexually, right? As Flor clearly mentioned out earlier, some of these questions are a little bit sensitive in nature, and we would definitely recommend using some of the best practices that we mentioned in the earlier slides. How does the response options look like? It's again a scale wherein we have always, so as in women of similar age group, respondent feels that women of similar age group and in their community at the place of work often or always feel that they are being made sexual advances or being targeted and being warranted to indulge in some sort of sexual behavior. So always is one of the options, often is another option, option number 2, option number 3 is sometimes, and then option number 4 is never. And then we also have the right to refusal. If the respondent does not want to answer that question, we respect that, and then there is that option to refuse to answer. Okay? So this is how broadly the module that we just heard Flor and Simon speak about in the interview looks like. So what we are going to see is how does the data look like. So a snapshot, this is from one of our projects, from the baseline that we conducted sometime last year. This is how the data would look like in the database, the raw uncleaned data, right? The option that we saw, these are the options. Each scenario here refers to what we just heard, which I just discussed, right? So in this case, you can see there is this household at the very top, where the respondent felt that women of their similar age group and in their community at the place of work, for scenario A, B, and C would never face something like that we have the scenarios that we mentioned, but sometimes may face a scenario that is scenario number D. Right? Okay. So what we do here is we use all these scenarios, these core 5 scenarios, to construct our indicator. So one thing that I want to mention is that if you go to the discussion paper that Kalyani and Jessica earlier mentioned, so these are the finalized set of list of items to be considered for indicator construction, and they are also available in our discussion paper if you guys want to take a look. So yes, so module from scenario A to E, we use all of these for constructing our indicators, and the adequacy, the appropriate, what we have considered adequate is that a woman respondent should have never faced a sexual hostility at his or her workplace, right? According to the respondent, the perception should be never. So once we translate this raw data into something that we can use to create our indicators. So if you see, wherever we see never, right, we assign a 1. And if it is something else like always, sometimes, often, we assign them a 0. And if they refuse to answer, we give them a missing. So how does this translate? So if you see in scenario 1, the respondent felt that they would never face a scenario wherein a sexual advances would be made, right? So there we assigned the scenario 1 as scenario A as 1 for first household, but 0 for the second household, because they said that sometimes this may happen in their community to the women of their women of the similar age group, right? So for each indicator, we either assign a 1 or a 0 or a missing. And as I mentioned, the 1 gets assigned when they meet the adequacy cutoff of never. They would have never faced something like this, right? What we do is after assigning these 0-1 binary variables to all these scenarios, we calculate something called continuous variable. Essentially, what we do is we score them. We take a summative score of among the 5 scenarios, in how many of these scenarios did we meet the adequacy cutoff, right? So as I earlier mentioned, it's never accepted. It is the adequacy threshold is that they should have never experienced a sexual hostility at his or her workplace, right? So in case of the first household, it's 4, and in the case of second household, it's 2, right? So the indicator that we construct for the final indicator that we construct around the perception of sexual hostility, again, the adequacy here is that they should have never experienced the sexual hostility at his or her workplace. And because we had 5 indicators and only in 4 they could say never, and then we have one scenario in first household, it is scenario D, and in the case of second household, it's scenario A, C, and D. That's why the continuous variable are 4 and 2, and they feel that sometimes or in some of the scenarios they would have faced sexual hostility at the workplace, and hence the binary here are assigned 0. Had the scores been 5, if they would have never faced sexual hostility in any of these scenarios, we might have seen a different indicator wherein it might have been given 1 instead of 0. So yeah, I'll just stop here. Over to you, Flo.
So now Emily is gonna discuss a little bit further about all of this that we're talking about, the validation, how all of this came to be to sustain the wording, the questions that we're doing through qualitative data analysis.
So yes, I'm Emily Myers. I focus on the qualitative work that we do for any of the WEAIs, and I'm a research analyst along with all my wonderful colleagues that have already presented today. So really quickly, why do we use qualitative data anyway? You know, most people hear, about the WEAI indices and they think it's only the quant, but we have used rigorous qualitative methods to back everything up and, flesh out all of our research findings, better understand them. But so really, we always, like to use qualitative approaches because we get a better understanding of gender relations in the study area, better understanding of the project we might be evaluating, the respondents themselves, as well as quantitative results if we already have some quantitative data, whether that's just, one survey or, from baseline, what have you. Additionally, we really like using qualitative methods because they are so flexible. You can use slightly different tools, slightly different open-ended qualitative questions, depending on what your study needs are. So for pro-WEAI+MI, we typically rely on a seasonal calendar, which is an activity where you have a group of men or women or a mix of both in the community come together and literally make a calendar for the principal agricultural activities in their in the study area, as well as using focus group discussions and in-depth interviews with a variety of different types of respondents, just depending on what your specific study needs are, your populations of interest, and so forth. So just a quick overview of in-depth interviews versus focus group discussions. The main purpose of using an in-depth interview is to help understand key events and experiences in respondents' lives across many topics. So of course, for pro-WEAI+MI, we do focus on, target value chains, but in-depth interviews also help us add more context to, where this agricultural value chain is kind of unfolding or what have you. Also, in-depth interviews help us understand practices. So what do individuals actually do, regardless of whether or not that's in line with what is considered socially appropriate or most common in their communities? And really, essentially, what in-depth interviews help us do is, answer the question, what do people actually do and why do they do that? So in contrast, focus group discussions are better suited to help us understand variation across a group. How you define group, of course, depends on your study. A lot of times I'm often just comparing men and women. Sometimes you might want to look at maybe you're working in South Asia and you want to look at women who live in nuclear households or women who live with their mother-in-laws in their extended family households. It just depends on what is salient for your study. But overall, focus group discussions really help us understand norms. So what is socially acceptable? What do people perceive as being most common in their community, and so forth. But so fundamentally, what focus group discussions help us do is answer the question, what is considered acceptable to do in this community and why? We're not figuring out if the individuals in each focus group actually do what is considered socially acceptable, but we just want to understand what the unspoken agreement, so to speak, is in the community. All right, so, today's theme for the presentation has been on, these two indicators, and I'm going to continue with that and go a little more in depth with them in thinking through using qualitative methods for pro-WEAI+MI. So as far as understanding control over use of income of the main value chain, we really want to use qualitative methods to understand this kind of control over income because it's key to understanding women's instrumental agency over their livelihoods. And that's regardless of what node of the value chain they work in, how much of their time they spend actually working on the main value chain of interest. It's just understanding what are women actually doing? How do they perceive what they're doing, in that principal agricultural value chain? If they're not actually that involved with it, do they want to be involved more? Those kinds of questions. So when the rubber actually hits the road, or when you're actually in the field face to face with your study respondents, oftentimes the questions that we ask to understand control over use of income from the main value chain shows up like asking, how does your household make decisions around income? It sounds a little more general than asking, how does your household make decisions around income related to this specific value chain, but it helps us establish kind of the overall context in which women and men are making decisions about income, and you can then probe and ask, okay, well, what about green beans, or what about plantains, whatever the specific, target value chain is. We also might ask, how are disagreements about how to spend household income resolved? And I really like this question. I feel like it's particularly illuminating to better understand the power dynamics within a household. If I'm not mistaken, earlier in the chat, we were kind of, people were positing questions about, oh, like, is there male dominance? Like, what's kind of the cultural context in which men and women can communicate? And so this kind of question, when asking about disagreements, I think really helps us answer those questions that were being raised earlier. And then finally, in a focus group, remember, we're looking at focus groups now, so we want to understand the norms, or what's perceived as most common or normal or acceptable. A question might show up like, generally in your community, do men and women make decisions over the use of income together? And if so, which sources of income? All right, so now turning towards what we've actually found around control over use of income, in our previous work. And I do want to take a moment to point out that this is a bit more general. I'm not speaking directly to the specific income from the target value chain that your study might be looking at, but just control over income, because again, it's more about having like the bigger picture of how all the different dynamics work together and whatnot. So for instance, in previous work in Ethiopia and in Tanzania, we found that women can control their personal income, not their household income. So, if a woman, has a small business on the side, or maybe she sells excess produce from like their home garden plot, she would be able to control that. But if she assists her husband in, growing their cash crops, he controls all of that money. It doesn't matter that she actually helped produce it. Those are what the norms are. And then there's also just the influences of household dynamics. So in some contexts, masculine control is prioritized over a woman trying to assert autonomy over any kind of income, particularly from our previous work in Mali and Ghana. And by that, I just mean, sometimes women will talk about the like trade-offs or assessments they're willing to make. And women say, well, no, I don't want control over income because it's more beneficial to me to be perceived as a good wife who's, a bit more submissive to her husband, because then she might have negotiating power over other things, perhaps, children, or she might feel more comfortable asking for a little bit of extra money, for healthcare or something like that. And then also, of course, it's qualitative. There's always going to be something that appears contradictory that pops up. So we have a great example from Bangladesh. So these are two different quotes from two different respondents from the same study. But one of them was saying, oh, women shouldn't go for income earning, that's a man's job. And then the other person says, well, women earn the money and the man uses the income, so he needs to tolerate that she has an opinion. And so I really like highlighting these seemingly contradictory answers, because I think it can help us understand, how effective projects were, or what some of the attitudes are that people might have that might help or constrain perhaps the development aim we're pursuing with an intervention and whatnot. So just remember, like, it's okay to have the contradictions when you're doing the qualitative work. People will have different perspectives. And I think it's most interesting and most honest in our reporting of results when we can find those contradictions and present them and really see the whole picture. All right, so next up is, understanding, feeling safe from sexual harassment. This is really important to us because we just want to understand the gendered constraints to women's participation in agricultural value chains. So of course, when asking about sexual harassment, it's a bit more sensitive. So, not that privacy and anonymity and confidentiality aren't important for any research study. They are extra important, so just be mindful of that. Also for pro-WEAI+MI, we really focus on perceptions of sexual harassment, not actual experiences. And that's because we just don't want to get too sensitive and trigger like a higher level of an ethical review, as well as just keeping our respondents as safe as possible. So oftentimes this might show up as instead of asking, what are your experiences with sexual harassment while you're moving out the community, it's more like, what safety considerations do people take? If you are interested in pursuing more specifics, I would just direct you to WHO guidelines for asking about sexual harassment, as well as experiences with violence. I just wanted to offer that resource for people who are interested. And then lastly, it's a sensitive module, as we said, and oftentimes, though, we ask about perceptions of sexual harassment, or like what is most common, or what's a typical experience where a woman might be in a community. Some people will have spontaneous submissions about their experiences with sexual harassment and or worse, really. So just know that, with good rapport, with good privacy, good anonymity, it is possible that that information might come up and might be something you're able to discuss in your write-up of results. But moving along, so how does asking about, feeling safe from sexual harassment show up in pro-WEAI for MI in the qualitative protocols? It's asking questions like, how do you ensure you're not as risk as you travel throughout your community? This is a funny question. Sometimes people will say like, oh, like I only go out during daylight hours, or I only go to the market with one of my friends, and that way I can avoid men. Sometimes people will say, oh, like we don't go out in dawn and dusk because that's when the snakes are out. So it's sometimes you get like a mixed bag, like you'll get an answer that you totally weren't expecting, but still that's information, and that oh, like maybe in this community, the perception of sexual harassment isn't too much of a concern for the women who live here. But anyway, my second question, generally what factors prevent women from working as agricultural producers in your community, if any? And then also, does the community regard, male and female producers or traders or marketers differently? So just kind of having people, reflect on how gender might affect someone's ability to work. All right, so as far as our existing findings on feeling safe from sexual harassment, from a study in Kenya, we found that sometimes women who are perceived as too friendly are perceived as promiscuous. So women often have to walk a fine line in, going out their, day-to-day business of being polite and respectful, but not too polite and respectful, because then it seems like they're not actually interested in their day-to-day business. We also found in a study in Malawi that sexual harassment does restrict women's freedom of movement. Generally women, were sharing like, oh yeah, we're traveling around the community, and then, the men see us out and about and they enjoy discussing us, is kind of how they talked about it. So just, women being out and about kind of being a source of gossip, perhaps. And then, the second point about, people liking to gossip at your back, and if they see you doing business, they assume that that is just a front or a face for you to engage in more socially unacceptable behaviors, promiscuous behaviors. So very much it seems in our work so far that feeling safe from sexual harassment requires women to walk a very fine line. And there's, very much a gender double standard on, who's allowed to go out and do their day-to-day business without, being seen as socially unacceptable.
Okay, so the next section of the presentation, we are gonna take what Emily has explained about the qualitative data, remind ourselves, go back to the quantitative data. We have work up until constructing the index at an individual level, and now we're gonna show you how all of that comes together in the final indices at an aggregated level, and how we combine all of these jigsaw puzzles to make a full picture of women's empowerment in our projects. And this section is going to be presented by Emily and Nate, who's another one of our team members. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Flor. My name is Nathaniel. I'm a research analyst with IFPRI. And as Flor said, we're going to be talking about interpreting this data through a hypothetical study that I will outline in the next slide. So the context of this is that we're talking about a project that seeks to empower a woman through some kind of new agricultural technique combined with gender sensitization training on household decision making delivered through a farmer producer organization. And we're just going to focus on two of the MI indicators, which are control over use of income in the main value chain and feels safe from sexual harassment, as we've been discussing earlier. Okay, so here is the data from, like I said, this is our fictional hypothetical study. And there's just a few points that I want to draw your attention to. So first at the top, above the bold word where we see pro-WEAI indicators, we have 4 different indicators. The first is empowerment score. This is the proportion of women and men respectively who are empowered, which in this case means you are adequate in at least 8 out of 10 indicators. Just as a reminder, the MI indicators are considered separately because these are optional. So you don't need them to construct the any of the pro-WEAI indicators. On the next line, we see percentage achieving empowerment. This is the, I'm sorry, I explained this wrong. The empowerment score is the average amount of indicators in which a respondent is adequate. So women are adequate in an average of just over 6 indicators out of the 10. And men on average are adequate in just over 8 out of 10 indicators. The percent achieving empowerment is the percentage of women and men who are adequate in 8 out of 10 indicators. So for women, this is about 22%, and for men, this is about 55%, which makes sense given the empowerment scores. The average woman is empowered in, is adequate in 6 out of the indicators. So on average, you know, very few of the women are empowered relative to the men. There's 338 dual adult households, which is the relevant sample for the gender parity index, which, and as we can see, percent achieving gender parity is 33.4. This is the percent which either has percent of households in which the woman either has the same or greater empowerment score as the man, or the woman is empowered. So if a woman is adequate in 8 out of 10 indicators and the man is adequate in all 10, it doesn't matter for gender parity that the woman has a lower empowerment score, but it matters that the woman is empowered. So below that, we see the pro-WEAI indicators, all 10 of them, and this is the percent of women and men who are adequate in each of these. So I won't go through all of them, but as you can see, there's quite a bit of variance both between the indicators and between women and men within each indicator. And below that, we see the MI indicators, and we've highlighted the ones that we're going to be talking about in the not the focus groups, in the breakout groups, which are control over use of income and outputs from the main value chain, as well as feels safe from sexual harassment. So the first of these, as you can see, the vast majority of women and men are adequate, but it's quite a bit lower for the second. So I'll turn it over to Emily now, unless there's any questions about any of these indicators.
First of all, thank you all for your time and your participation and listening to us, and your feedback is extremely useful. And any questions you have, we have you can reach us out to the email address that Ara has shared in the chat room earlier today. We welcome you use Elena, can you pull up the presentation around slide 45? That is our research center. That's where you are going to find all the information with publications done by in the WEAI family. You're going to find there also like all the other studies, other studies that are related to us. You're going to find data sets. You're going to have all the instruments. You're going to have the guides and everything that that you can use. We are going to be thankful, like this work has had several donors through the years, which says a lot about how much we have been trusted with our work, which we're very grateful for. And in the presentation, you are also going to find a couple of slides with some readings that help inform our presentation.
Yeah, I'll just say a few things. First, thanks, as Flor mentioned, thanks to everyone for joining and participating. And I think overall we see this as just your introduction to using the pro-WEAI in the future. If you have projects where you want to use pro-WEAI in an impact evaluation or whatever it might be, check out the pro-WEAI resource center. You can download a lot of information on the questionnaires, how to use the questionnaires, etc. I think that you'll get a lot of your questions answered there, and then when you get to the next step, other options can be, diving into these e-learning courses, which you shared the link to. And when you need more help still, we have the WEAI Resource Center and email. You can reach out to us and we can share more information. We're always happy to chat with you, help give you more ideas and support. So thank you. Best of luck using pro-WEAI for market inclusion. And we look forward to your fabulous research products based on all of this, which you have approximately 1 year to prepare and present at next year's ANH Academy. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Bye.